In March 2026, two announcements dropped within days of each other. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses told 8 million members they could now store their own blood for surgery, reversing a 65-year ban that cost thousands of lives. Days later, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announced that women could finally lead Sunday school, a position reserved for priesthood holders since the 19th century. Two completely different theologies. One worships in temples and follows a living prophet. The other gathers in kingdom halls and answers to an anonymous committee in upstate New York. And yet both made the exact same move at the exact same time. Loosen the grip just enough to stop the bleeding, but never enough to actually let go. This is not a coincidence. This is a strategy. And by the end of this video, you will understand the corporate playbook both organizations are now following. A playbook designed not to save souls, but to survive lawsuits, stop hemorrhaging members, and protect financial empires worth hundreds of billions of dollars combined. But here is what neither organization wants you to figure out. If both claim to be the only channel God uses on earth, why are they hiring from the same consulting firm? Part 1. From prophets to brand ambassadors. For most of the 20th century, both organizations ran on the authority of a single voice. For the Latter-day Saints, that voice belonged to the prophet, a man believed to receive direct revelation from God and steer the course of an entire global community. From Brigham Young to Russell M. Nelson to now Dallin H. Oaks, the title has always carried absolute spiritual weight. For the witnesses, it was the governing body, a small group of men first in Brooklyn, now in Warwick, who claimed to be the sole channel between Jehovah God and the human race. For decades, most rank-and-file witnesses could not name a single member of that body. They were deliberately invisible. Faceless authority is harder to question because there is no face to confront. But then something shifted. The Mormons began quietly delegating real institutional power away from the prophet and into the hands of committees, legal departments, and financial entities. Ensign Peak Advisors, the church's secretive investment arm, was managing over $100 billion in equities, making trades on Wall Street, and paying a $4 million SEC fine, all while the prophet smiled warmly during General Conference and talked about families. The spiritual leader became the face. The financial machinery moved behind boardroom doors. The witnesses followed an almost identical arc, but in the opposite direction. Instead of hiding leadership behind committees, they thrust the governing body into the spotlight. JAW Broadcasting launched, and suddenly Jeffrey Jackson, Stephen Lett, Kenneth Cook, and the rest were on screen every month. They told personal anecdotes, shed tears on camera, cracked awkward jokes, and shared childhood memories. They became television hosts, and this was not a cosmetic choice. It was a calculated legal and public relations strategy. Here is why it works. It is extremely difficult to prosecute, protest, or publicly challenge a smiling elderly man who reminds you of your grandfather. Try putting that face on the evening news next to the word cult. It does not stick. A faceless institution can be a villain. A relatable old man with a trembling voice cannot. That is the shield. The Mormons built it inward, professionalizing the corporation while keeping the prophet's image warm and pastoral. The witnesses built it outward, personalizing the leadership so the public would see people, not a regime. But the destination was identical. Transform a religion into a media corporation with a compliance department and a human face designed to absorb criticism without ever reflecting it back toward the institution. Part 2. The Language Laboratory. If you want to understand what a religion is actually afraid of, do not read its scriptures. Read its legal filings. And then read the dictionary it rewrote the year before those filings were submitted. In August 2024, the witnesses quietly replaced the term disfellowshipping with removal from the congregation. The judicial committee, 3 elders in a back room deciding a member's fate, became a committee of elders. The word judicial vanished entirely. These were not theological updates. They were legal edits. To understand why, you need to understand what happened in Norway. In 2022, the Norwegian government revoked the witnesses' registration as a religious community, citing their shunning practices as a form of psychological coercion, particularly against minors who were baptized as young as 12 or 13. That deregistration was not merely a bureaucratic inconvenience, it was a financial amputation. Under Norwegian law, registered religious communities receive state subsidies, roughly $1.6 million annually for the witnesses. They also enjoy tax exemptions and the legal recognition of their marriages. Losing registration meant losing all of it. The case moved through district court, appeals court, and finally reached the Norwegian Supreme Court in 2026, where the witnesses ultimately prevailed. But the terminology changes did not arrive after the verdict. They arrived before it. The timing was not spiritual. It was surgical. By replacing punitive language with pastoral language, the organization could argue before judges across Europe and Canada. We are not punishing anyone. We are a private association exercising the right of admission. We do not judge. We care. The Mormons had already built the same firewall years earlier. Excommunication became withdrawal of membership. The disciplinary council became the membership council. Same tribunal, same consequences, same family fractures. Entirely new vocabulary. Both organizations discovered the same courtroom truth. Judges do not rule on theology. They rule on terminology. If a document says punishment, a court sees coercion. If a document says pastoral care, a court sees religious autonomy. The word care protects the portfolio. The word punishment puts it at risk. And so both institutions built what amounts to a corporate euphemism engine, a machine that continuously replaces legally dangerous words with legally safe ones, while the underlying mechanism of control remains untouched. It is not reform, it is rebranding. Part 3. The franchise model. In Utah, the Latter-day Saint Church operates a multi-million-dollar studio complex capable of producing Hollywood-grade biblical epics. In Ramapo, New York, the witnesses have spent years and hundreds of millions in donations building a massive media production facility, largely on the backs of unpaid volunteer labor. What we are witnessing is the death of the local congregation and the birth of the multimedia franchise. Inside Mormon meeting houses, locally prepared lessons are steadily giving way to centrally produced video content. The April 2026 General Conference eliminated the Saturday evening session entirely, consolidating messaging into 4 tightly controlled broadcasts. Starting September 2026, the Sunday class schedule is being restructured yet again, the third major format overhaul in under a decade. Each restructuring strips a little more autonomy from the local bishop and places a little more control in the hands of Salt Lake City. The witnesses have gone even further. Kingdom Hall meetings now feature JW broadcasting segments as core teaching material. The midweek meeting that once ran on spontaneous, congregation-driven Bible discussion has been gradually replaced by pre-recorded content approved and produced at Warwick headquarters. Local elders read from scripts. Deviation is not encouraged. The logic is identical for both organizations. A local elder might go off script. A local bishop might offer a personal interpretation that contradicts headquarters. A centrally produced video never deviates. It never contradicts the narrative. It never generates a headline. And it never triggers a lawsuit. Control the content. Control the message. Control the message. Control the member. Now consider the children. The Mormons have their animated scripture heroes. The witnesses have Caleb and Sophia, a pair of cheerful cartoon children who teach obedience, field service, and loyalty to the organization through brightly colored adventures. These are not educational supplements. They are identity installation programs. Both organizations understood a principle that Silicon Valley would later call onboarding. If you want lifetime retention, you do not begin with the adult. You begin with the child. You build the emotional architecture of belonging before critical thinking has a chance to develop. By the time that child is old enough to question, the identity is already load-bearing. Removing it feels like losing a limb. And that feeling, that terror of self-amputation, is not a bug. It is the product. Part 4. The pressure valve. But a product that only generates pressure eventually explodes. To keep the system running without ruptures, the machine needs periodic relief. Small concessions, controlled releases, just enough air to stop the member from walking out the door. In 2023, the witnesses announced that beards were now a matter of personal conscience. Men who had been denied speaking assignments, elder appointments, and even informal respect for decades over facial hair could suddenly grow a beard without penalty. Women could wear pants to meetings. Around the same time, Mormon missionaries were permitted to wear non-white shirts. Female missionaries could finally wear pants in the field. Garment requirements were quietly adjusted. These seem like progressive moves. They are not. They are pressure valves engineered around a concept that behavioral economists call exit cost reduction. Here is how it works. A member who has been questioning the organization for months or years, reading online, watching videos like this one, feeling the slow erosion of belief, is standing at the door. They are calculating the cost of leaving, the lost friendships, the family rupture, the identity collapse. And then the organization loosens a rule about beards, or pants, or shirt color, and that member recalibrates. The organization just gave them something. It feels like progress. It redefines the internal thermometer of oppression. The member thinks, maybe it is changing. Maybe they are listening. Maybe the cost of staying just dropped. And they step back from the door. That is the entire function. Cosmetic flexibility on issues that cost the organization absolutely nothing, appearance, clothing, grooming, creates the sensation of freedom, while the pillars that actually define institutional power remain cemented. The member feels liberated because they can now grow a beard. They do not notice that they still cannot question the governing body, refuse a blood card, or talk to their disfellowshipped daughter without risking their own standing. But the March 2026 blood doctrine shift is the most structurally significant version of this strategy the witnesses have ever deployed. For 65 years, the organization taught that storing your own blood and having it reinfused later violated Jehovah's command to abstain from blood. This was not presented as a suggestion. It was enforced as divine law. Hospital liaison committees sat beside dying patients and urged them to refuse. Advanced medical directives carried by millions of witnesses contained the explicit instruction, "I refuse to predonate and store my own blood for later infusion." In 1994, Awake magazine printed the photographs of 26 children under the headline, "Youths Who Put God First," celebrating minors who died refusing blood as martyrs of faithfulness. In 2026, governing body member Garrett Lush appeared on camera and declared that storing and reinfusing your own blood is now a personal decision. The Bible, he said, does not comment on this matter. Place those two moments side by side. In 1994, the organization published photographs of 26 dead children as evidence of faithfulness. In 2026, it reclassified the policy behind those deaths as a matter of personal conscience. No retraction, no apology, no memorial, just a reclassification, delivered with the procedural tone of a corporate policy update. And functionally, that is exactly what it is. By calling it conscience, the organization shifts accountability from the institution to the individual. If a witness dies tomorrow refusing autologous blood, the organization can now say, "We gave them the choice. They decided for themselves." The Mormons operate the same valve at a different pressure point. Women can now lead Sunday school, announced in March 2026 as a historic expansion of female participation. But examine what actually moved. Women still cannot hold the priesthood. They still cannot preside over sacrament meeting, sit on bishops' councils, or perform temple ordinances. They were given leadership of the one calling that the church itself describes as the quietest and least visible in the entire ward. The valve released just enough steam to generate a headline. The boiler underneath did not change at all. Part 5. The Pillars That Cannot Fall. Every controlled institution has load-bearing walls. Remove one, and the entire structure comes down. For the Jehovah's Witnesses, those walls are the year 1914 and the practice of shunning. 1914 is not just a date. It is the foundation on which the governing body's entire authority rests. According to their theology, Jesus Christ returned invisibly in 1914, inspected all Christian organizations between 1914 and 1919, and chose the Bible students, the precursors to Jehovah's Witnesses, as his faithful and discreet slave on earth. If 1914 is wrong, the inspection never happened. If the inspection never happened, the selection in 1919 never happened. And if the selection never happened, then the governing body is not God's channel. It is just a committee of men in a building in New York making rules about beards and blood. They can soften language. They can rename committees. They can let members store their own blood. But they cannot touch 1914 without pulling the foundation out from under themselves. Shunning, now called removal, is the enforcement mechanism that keeps everything standing. You can question privately. You can doubt silently. But the moment you speak, you risk expulsion. And expulsion means losing your family, your community, and your entire social identity. The Norwegian Supreme Court ruled in 2026 that this practice is protected under religious freedom. That legal victory will make the witnesses less likely to change shunning in substance, not more. The label was updated. The weapon was not. For the Mormons, the load-bearing walls are the first vision and the unbroken chain of prophetic authority. Joseph Smith's account of seeing God the Father and Jesus Christ in a grove of trees in 1820 is the origin event of the entire religion. If that event did not happen as described, there is no restored priesthood, no temple authority, no Book of Mormon, and no reason for the church to exist as a separate institution. The living prophet is the continuation of that claim, an unbroken line from Joseph Smith to Dallin H. Oakes, each man holding the same keys, the same authority, the same direct access to God. The church can restructure its Sunday meetings every 3 years. It can let women run Sunday school. It can build 200 temples on 6 continents. But it cannot allow members to critically examine the first vision or reduce the prophet to a symbolic figurehead without severing the cord that holds everything together. Both organizations share the same structural DNA, an unfalsifiable origin claim that justifies a centralized leadership that cannot be questioned. Everything around it, the meetings, the dress codes, the terminology, the media, is negotiable. The origin story is not. And as long as that story remains untouchable, every other change is decoration. Both organizations claim divine revelation. Both say they are uniquely chosen. And yet when you strip away the theology and look only at the decisions made in boardrooms, legal offices, and production studios over the past 3 years, what you see is not 2 religions following God. What you see is 2 corporations following each other. The revelation did not come from heaven. It came from the same crisis management manual. And at some point, the distinction between a prophetic announcement and a corporate press release disappeared entirely. Neither organization will ever admit this, but now you can see it. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. If this video put words to something you have been feeling but could not name, you are not alone. Subscribe, because we are pulling this thread until there is nothing left to hide behind. Hit the notification bell, and send this to someone who still thinks the changes are a sign of progress. They deserve to see the full picture.